Hello and welcome back to another wonderful week of hockey on 216, proudly driven by Hyundai. With me in studio as always, Bridget Key, Moodles, great to have you both back. Lovely, and some of you have been doing all sorts this weekend, and we're going to delve into some of your travels, Moodles, and Bridget, a little bit of a celebrity hockey match on the weekend as well. Manny Sekale also joining us. Great to have you, Manny. For those of you who are watching any hockey on SuperSport schools this year, you would have heard the wonderful dulcet tones of Manny talking about the game, doing a lot of commentary for us. Hockey, we're really into the season right now. We've been through the majority of the festivals, but I think we'd probably be a bit miss from a school's perspective if we didn't recognise that it's also a big month for the national men's team. They're going into a trial period. I think the women's team is pretty much selected, Bridget. It's got a bit of, I don't know if there's any trials coming up, but the men's have got. Towards the end of the month, they're gathering as quite a big squad in Pretoria. They're going to be playing 3 matches, the 27th of May, the 28th of May, and the 29th of May. It's open to the public. It's a wonderful opportunity. And I think as a hockey community, we really should be calling on all the schools, the coaches, let's get out there, let's support these teams, let's go and see what this men's outfit have got. They're under a new coaching staff this year. They've got a World Cup to qualify for next year. So it'll be really fantastic if the community can get out there and support them.
We don't get access to a lot of international hockey, live international hockey, and this is the closest we'll get now in some time. So, really encourage coaches and players to get out there and watch. It seems like we're in a bit of a transition phase as a national team. Lots of young players on that list.
Been a couple of retirements.
Some players missing from that list. I think our viewers will know who's missing from that list, but certainly an exciting phase coming up under new leadership.
And in prep for Nations Cup,
yes,
which is a big tournament for them. So the girls are the same. They've got that Nations Cup coming up in Poland. So, lots of
boys in Malaysia, aren't they?
Boys in Malaysia,
a big one, Nations Cup to qualify for that World Cup for next year. Well, no, they've qualified for the World Cup. No, they haven't. They've still got to qualify at the Nations Cup.
Yeah.
So tough, interesting one for them. In other great news for hockey, a club that you quite closely affiliated with,
yes,
Bridget, and I know you turned out in a celebrity outfit. Pirates have opened up their first AstroTurf at Pirates in collaboration with Blegari Primary, another wonderful new AstroTurf.
Really exciting for club hockey and also primary school hockey, and in such a esteemed club, and it's going to really put them on the map even further. They've had an Astro there, but it was not well done.
As you say, just a wonderful club as well, and Brad and the team do such a wonderful job at that club. Manny was saying he sees this sort of becoming the club where a lot of the social activity in hockey starts to centre on, because it is just such a wonderful club.
Yeah, 100%. Possibly one of the best clubs as it is already. And
yes,
one thing that they've been missing is that AstroTurf. And it's situated in such a beautiful place. And I really do look forward to the season ahead on that turf.
Friday night was another wonderful, wonderful night of Friday Night Lights. We really are loving our Fridays, and we're getting such wonderful feedback from so many people in the community. We really appreciate about watching hockey on Channel 216 on a Friday night, obviously also on the SABC Plus app, as well as obviously on the SuperSport Schools app. Some really big games. First game up this weekend, or not in any particular order, from Friday night was St. Charles celebrating their 150th. It was their reunion weekend, and they're hosting, the South Africa's hockey school, Maritzburg College. Who else would you want to host at such an esteemed occasion as your reunion day? Manny, you watched the game quite closely.
Yeah, interesting game, tricky game for St. Charles. Obviously on their 150th. They would have wanted to get a better result, but that Maritzburg College side just coming out and showing their class. It's a tale of two very different sides. One side, which has played 20 games leading up to this already. They were in the Hibbert Shield. They were at KSFest. They were at Nomads. And on the other side, St. Charles, 9 games leading into this one. So unfortunately for St. Charles, going down 5-0 in that one, but they were in it for a long time. So lots of good signs from St. Charles, 2-0 at half-time, but Maritzburg College just showing their class at the end of the day.
I was going to say, I'm sure you and I was probably going to say the same thing. It's a college team that perhaps didn't have a great time going into this.
Now.
What I wanted to say about that, I'm not sure what St. Charles' program looked like after independent schools, but Maritzburg College coming off the weekend before that, being at Hibbert Shield, I think they just carry that momentum now, and it was a tough Hibbert Shield for them. Absolutely. And I always knew that St. Charles might be on the receiving end after a week back at school training. Maritzburg College would have come out firing.
And I think you want to see Mark Saunders and that program really coming into their sort of derby part of the season now. They got a lot to make up for. Hibbert was disappointing for them. After that, had a very good Nomads and a very good Kes tournament as well, Maritzburg College. So Hibbert was a bit of a blip on the radar for that Maritzburg College outfit, and let's hope, well, I'll certainly be cheering them on, and as we see the Red Army go from strength to strength.
Not biased at all.
No.
Never. Bridget, Gim Blomhof in the girls, another big one on Friday Night Lights.
Great game. It was one where Blomhof started out really well. They got the first draw of the card with a nice straight poke on a PC, and they got that goal in. And you saw for the first time Polchum really, being stretched and being put to test. But they had lots of penalty corners as well. They kept testing the goalkeeper of Blomhof. I mean, the goalkeeper, Imala Burtzis, in the goals, she did particularly well. She really made some cracking saves. And speaking to Jenny King, who coaches the Blomhof side, she just said it was such a nice game because her girls played with such heart and such focus. And then eventually Gim just also finding the back of the net. They kept sinking their teeth into it, so that draw came to quarter 3 and quarter 4. Eventually, Gim snuck one in right at the end. So
that was for a
2-1 win.
Tristan, we keep saying that the hockey in the Boerland's tough, eh?
It's tough. But you know what I liked about what Bridget was speaking about now, and we've spoken about it in the show previously, is that, if you've got a good set piece, it certainly puts you at an advantage. And we could see having a good defensive setup driven by a good goalkeeper. I mean, the number of corners that Gim had, and for Blomhof to keep them out for as long as they did, kept them in the game right until the fourth quarter. Your keeper has a good game, it's a different result.
Absolutely.
And I mean, the second goal for Gim was actually on a stroke right in the very last 4 minutes. And that one in itself, tough call to make from an umpire, a good decision, but, keeping it 1-1 right until the end there from Blomhof was really, really good hockey from their side.
Absolutely. And, just down the road, Bridget, Renish versus Herschel, played to a 1-1 draw.
Yes, incredible game. Such an exciting game. I think Stacey, the coach of Herschel, said it was just one of those nail biters on both ends. You just found that players that just did so well for the Herschel side, their PC attack wasn't good enough. She does say that they weren't clinical enough, but their PC defense against Renish, who had multiple penalty corners. Again, Haley in the goals just doing wonders for Herschel.
Chris Gerber and that Renish team are going to be a bit disappointed. They're just not getting the results when you expect them to get the results. And we just expected so much from them this season. I mean, they're right up there. Let's not take it away from them, but perhaps just not getting the results that they would like to be getting.
I think that they've felt a weight of expectation the whole season. They were certainly the favourites at St Mary's, didn't get over the line there. And I think, they've been the team to beat. So I think teams have prepared well to play against them.
Absolutely.
They've worked hard on
targets on the back.
For sure.
They made mention of that in commentary. Lanice Marie made mention of exactly that it's a tough one for Herschel to come in on to play. And they held their own really well against a Renish side that is doing particularly well. They're just not getting that final score. So, great one on their side.
Two teams that are, you got to watch a bit of the Bishop Sachs game.
Yes.
Moodles?
A spirited performance by Bishops. I thought they stood up incredibly well to Sachs. I've said it all along that Sachs have one or two individuals that'll turn a game on its head. And so I think that, like we saw when Paul Roos played Sachs and held them to a draw that went to shootout at Hibbert Shield, I think against Sachs you have to make sure that your counter defense is sorted. I think it needs to be a training principle during the week in the build-up there, because they turn defense into attack in the matter of 3 or 4 passes. And we see that's happened again this weekend.
And obviously within hockey we've been sort of looking at Lita Cry very closely, but Tennis was the man with the hat-trick in this game. Another player that we identified last week is really one to watch in the Sachs team.
And it just shows again the value of a striker who gets opportunities and puts the game to bed.
And you know what they do so well, Moodles, is that they draw the play so much to the attack that you find that, as soon as they get a chance, they just capitalize on it and they find the space. And they're just really, really a clinical side.
No, they are.
And back in the Boerland, we were talking about Gim. There was another highly anticipated match. That Paul Gim boys team, who've done so well in recent weeks, were up against Paul Roos Gymnasium. we thought it was going to be a much tighter contest than it turned out to be. 6-2 in the end to what they're calling Baker Ball, I see now.
Well, it
is a new phrase.
it started out as a very tightly contested game. I mean, it only really opened up for Paul Roos at the end. So right up until that last little bit.
Jimmy Guts, as they speak about often in rugby, was definitely on display. But that Paul Roos gymnasium, the Paul Roos team is really looking to be a much better team than maybe the results at Hibbert showed and various things. If there's someone that's going to challenge Sachs this year, and maybe JP, it is that team.
I'm looking forward to that Paul Roos Sachs game.
It's coming up 30th of May, I think, will be that fixture.
I might have to put my neck out there and say I'm putting my money on Paul Roos. But coming back to that game again, you know, I think that if we look at Paul Jim's sort of season so far, they have worked incredibly hard. They've put up a fight every single game, you know, even in that final Hibbert Shield. It was, you know, 4-3 with less than 5 minutes to go. They've had to put in a shift, you know. And I've always said that when this Paul Roos team gets it right, I saw them play at Coastal Cup. I saw them a game at Hibbert Shield. I thought they were better at Coastal Cup. When they get it right, they're going to be incredibly difficult to beat. They also tell me that 13 of those boys are back for Paul Roos next year.
Some of those youngsters. And talking about one of those youngsters, young Charlie Boucher's been out for a year or two injured. I think nearly 2 years that he's been out injured. He scored a goal he's recently come back into that side. I think he's only grade 10 or grade 11 boy as well. So, yeah, wonderful welcome back for young Charlie Boucher, back onto the scene, a really talented youngster. And in another good news down there, Christo Swanepoel, their captain, playing his 100th game. And as far as I understand, he's only the second player to have done that for Paul Roos Gymnasium. So there we see him with his very proud parents, no doubt. He's also one to watch.
He's a talented player. Watched him at Coastal Cup. Immediately, you know, when you look at a game and you can see one boy just bossing the midfield, he was that guy. You know, he's so good on the ball. Comfortable under pressure. You know, I think he's one to watch in the national teams.
Definitely one of those players that a Michael Baker likes, isn't it? And a wonderful Friday night of hockey, Friday Night Lights. There were dozens and dozens of derbies over the rest of the weekend. And after the break, we'll be discussing some of those from around the country. Welcome back to Hockey on 216, proudly driven by Hyundai. We're right in the middle of derby season now. We really are. The festivals are behind us. We're moving into a lot of the local derbies, as well as quite a few travelling derbies, Crinison, that we're going to talk about. I mean, this last weekend just seemed to be schools travelling all over the country.
I mean, if you consider the number of kids that moved between the Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal this weekend.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know at one stage there were 4 different schools, each with 6 to 8 buses at Montrose at the same time. You can imagine the chaos.
I can imagine.
A lot of burgers.
I think some of the Bloem schools were obviously also travelling down to Paarl and stuff as well. Eastern Cape. So, really a lot of travelling. And the good news, obviously, that they all got home safely and played some wonderful hockey. Bridget, I think you were saying 410 hockey matches we streamed on Saturday?
Yeah, not just Saturday, over the weekend. I mean, 410, I think we made reference of one of them was an under-16G team even.
I actually watched that. That was Rondebosch versus Sachs. I saw them in the rain and cold on Saturday morning. I'm not sure anyone should have been out anywhere playing sport on Saturday morning in Cape Town, but they were certainly out there and playing. Some wonderful noteworthy achievements. And when we talk about these caps, and it's so important to see kids that reach these milestones of longevity. Jihan or Gigi Abrahams from Wynberg Girls, who recently played her 100th game for Wynberg Girls. And interestingly, there she matched her teammate, Khadija Conrad, who recently, a couple of weeks back, played 100 games there. So, wonderful for both those girls at Wynberg Girls. And now congratulations to both of them. But Bridget, I think this last week, DSG must have had 5 or 6 girls playing their 50th all at the same time, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, amazing, because DSG don't play a lot of fixtures. There they are. So from the top, you got Mia Jenner, you got Jocelyn Apple. Mom, Jen Apple was a top hockey player in her day.
Jen must have been shouting and screaming on the side of that, I have
no doubt. You got Megan Plumbridge, Catherine Bowker, Lucy Holderness, younger sister to Abigail Holderness, who's going to get her 100th cap this coming weekend, which is incredible.
We'll be watching
and then
good luck
Jessica,
to her on her 100th.
Exactly, and Jessica Stevens. So a lovely, lovely achievement for DSG with all of those players. So
that's wonderful to all of those players, and we congratulate them. And maybe, Chris, we should start in your sort of neck of the woods. some really good derbies in Pretoria this weekend. Maybe one of the biggest ones in Pretoria, whether it be rugby or netball or hockey, is Garsfontein Waterkloof. So Garsies Kloofies was a big one.
Yeah, always a lot of needle in that fixture. Good game, but Garsfontein getting the better of Waterkloof there, winning that game 2-0. And a boy who I've really enjoyed watching play, Lucan Brunet. Excellent for Garsfontein. He's so exciting going forward. I think he scored both goals for Garsfontein. And again, going to be a boy to watch in the national setup going forward.
You called him out last week and you said what a good player you thought that he was. And obviously joined by Letsecho Mazizo, another one that's impressed us at Garsfontein this season.
No, very good player. And I think Northern's announced their teams this week, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And I think they'll be competitive at RPT. When I look at how their teams have performed this year, I think it's going to be a good Northern's
Absolutely, because Affies have played a lot of good hockey. Pretoria boys have played some really good hockey. St Albans, although I think some of the really good players in St Albans will be in that Northern's under 16 team, and they'll really be one to watch that Northern's under 16 team this year. In the Waterkloof team, anyone sort of stick out for you that you watched in this last weekend?
Yeah, unfortunately, didn't really get an opportunity to have a look at that
game.
There's a Haasbroek young Ruben in the Waterkloof team. I actually watched him play last year at the beginning of the season, and he, he's a really competent midfielder.
In fact, both teams had a really powerful midfield. I mean, Dirkie van den Berg, who joins him in that, also looked to be the business. So there will be some interesting selection challenges there for that northern side, trying to decide who those midfielders are.
Absolutely. I mean, the strengths in our schools hockey certainly, looks to be in the midfield this year. We spoke about that last week where we just named, a ton of midfielders there.
Yeah, you couldn't pick anyone.
Well, as you see Guy Elliott in under 21s now picking most of his midfield in the 21s as his defenders. So, that is really where a lot of that hockey talent lies, isn't it? Another good, another big game there, and it was the third time they've played each other this season. Hilton travelled to Pretoria Boys for their sort of annual travelling fixture.
I think it was the other way around. Pretoria Boys High were at Hilton.
We're down at Hilton.
So home game for Hilton there. They winning 1-0 against PBHS. Maybe
nice result.
Very good result.
Off the back of 2-2-all draws. That's what they've had this season have been.
So Hilton will be happy with that. And again, I think it comes down to the work that goes in behind the scenes by the coaches. Devon and Damien would have done their homework, having played Pretoria Boys twice before, and certainly would have come out with a plan, So I think that's a good result.
It was another straight poke by young Ben Wilson, who likes to hit them from the top of the D, doesn't he?
Something you don't see often anymore.
Takes after his dad.
I was about to say, his old man Sean Wilson was not dissimilar in his day.
He hits a golf ball just as sweetly. So, a good 1-0 there. And the Pretoria Boys goalkeeper, again, he's performed really well this whole season. And in that fixture particularly, I know he's been a massive frustration for Hilton all season. So they'll certainly be pleased to get one over there. Southerns, moving a little bit onto this side of the river. St Stithians, St David's, a battle of the saints. Not much of a battle in the end.
Yeah, interesting result. I thought it would be a little bit tighter. It's a really young St David's side, it must be said. I think there's 3 matrics and about 6th grade 11s and 6th grade 10s. So they're building towards something. But a class outfit in St Stithians, as always, managing to get 8 goals in that game. It was tight up until about the first quarter, but Aidan Blatch, Jason Joyner and Matthew Douglas were absolutely phenomenal in that game, and they managed to get them their side over the line.
And that St Stithians team, through the season, we've started to talk about them, and if we start looking at our sort of big 4 or 5 teams in the country, they're certainly in there from this side of South Africa, certainly them and Jeppe, Paul Ruiz and Sachs, the other 2, probably making the 4 teams that have generally impressed us the most.
For sure. And I think if I look at the strengths of those teams, and people are going to probably say I'm beating on about this, but defensively, St Stithians, Jeppe, Paul Ruiz, a number of these teams take deep defense seriously. Hilton are another one. St Albans, they train deep defense as one of the sort of principles of how they play, and you can see that if you do that well, you're always going to be competitive in games, and they're so good then going forward. And I think that's what we're going to see more of. The teams who look after the house back home and make sure that they don't concede goals are going to be the successful ones.
And I think that's applying even to the girls' games so much at the moment, is that you're seeing a lot more focus on the defensive play, on outletting play. I mean, you've got players that there's a player at Gasfontein who can throw a 50-meter overhead as a schoolgirl, and that is phenomenal. I mean, she really can. Andrea Groenewald. I mean, it's exceptional. That's exceptional if you look at things like that.
It's such a 3D aerial game, and those skills are so important. I think some of the schools, and I'm not going to mention any names, you'll know exactly who I'm thinking about. They don't like to play a lot of aerial ball. It's starting to hurt their hockey, and we're starting to see them playing in the bottom half of tournaments that they shouldn't be playing in the bottom half of. So, absolutely. And you talk about defenders, young joiner there. I agree with you. I've watched him a couple of times this season. I think he's an under 16 boy as well.
Very exciting.
I think he's got something. Absolutely. Jeppe, probably not too much to say. They just keep marching on, but a much tighter probably than we might have anticipated. Only 2-1 over what is a very good Northwood team who seem to just be going down by one goal so often.
They were 1-0 up at half time. I thought they pushed Jeppe. But Jeppe, just showing their maturity there, sticking to the plan and ending up winning 2-1.
Those poor Northwood boys, they've spent a bit of time travelling up and down, haven't they? We've seen them a few times up here in Joburg, so thank goodness they've got those Hyundai buses that they seem to travel so comfortably in, because that really was a very good result. So they clearly arrived here ready to play.
Yes.
Rested from the bus.
Tough to go down, but they were in it.
Yeah, and it's a tricky place to go. The Boden Astro, after spending 7 hours on a bus, it really is difficult in front of the Jeppe boys and supporters. So I think that's a really good result for Northwood.
Absolutely. As you say, very, very, very tough place to play hockey.
Very tough.
A very, very good Jeppe team that continue to impress.
Yeah, Calvin, I mean, another team that I think will be elated with their weekend is Westville. Coming up to play Kes and winning that game 3-2. I mean, Kes have had a good season up until now. We named a couple of their players in our teams last week. And
bit of a grudge game for Sharman Naidoo there.
Yes, yeah. And a bit of needle in it for Sharman, having been at Westville before. So, a really, really good win for Westville, who have had their challenges this season.
Absolutely.
But, certainly will take a lot of comfort in that result, with also a young group of players.
And if I'm not mistaken, there was a young Westville boy also got his 50th cap.
Yes, Seth Simpson.
Yeah, Seth Simpson.
No, I think he actually scores the winning goal, or he actually
had
put it over to us. Yes. So another one with 50, which is congratulations to Seth. Interesting that these two KZN schools who haven't necessarily, Northwood have certainly played very good hockey, but haven't always got the results that we perhaps, they had that very tough loss to Myklaus and haven't necessarily got the results that they probably thought they deserved. Westville, who's had a very tough season, both come to Joburg and really doing very well. Kes will be disappointed with that result because they've pretty much had a solid season, a lot of draws, but a solid season. They'll be disappointed with that result.
Yeah, look, it's a fighting side, that Kes side, and as you mentioned, they don't lose a lot of games, and that's one of the things that Sharman Naidoo really does push. Make sure that they're solid on defence, they fight till the very end. So that result for Westville away from home, I think that's a brilliant result for them.
Yeah, considering that Kes are ranked 6th at the moment,
yeah,
Westville will take that.
Don't talk to Bridget now about rankings. Yeah. And it just shows you again, I think, one of the difficulties in this ranking system and the way that it's played. It's very difficult to judge performances.
Yeah, I agree with you.
It's a very difficult thing to do. I'm not sure anyone who says they can do the maths on that really can do the maths on it. I think there are too many variations in who you play against, who you get to play a lot of hockey against, how many matches are played. I mean, you spoke earlier about St. Charles have played 9, Maritzburg College have played 20. St. Charles have pretty much played all their hockey in KZN except maybe for the Independent Schools tournament. Maritzburg College have gone and played against some of the biggest schools at the biggest tournaments in the country. How do you start judging those sort of performances? Really,
Calvin,
really is tough.
Another result that will be of interest to our viewers is Myklaus Kearsney.
Absolutely.
I think Myklaus winning that game 3-0, comprehensive victory there. And Kearsney, who've been competitive, I think they'll be a bit disappointed with that. Keegan's really competitive, and Nick Bereshon's got one over them.
Yeah, look, I think Nick's just every time I see that team play, they just seem to do more and more. And one player that's really starting to grow on me this season is Gordon Dacher in defence. He'll be playing for Inland. Interesting story. He's actually a German kid that came out to be a boarder. So his brother was on an exchange at Myklaus, and he's now come to spend his high school career, or spend most of his high school career now at Myklaus, and he's really starting to impress, and certainly one that I think we'll be watching very closely when we get to the interprovincial tournaments in Maritzburg later in the year.
I think Myklaus are just going to also grow from strength to strength. as the season goes on. You
Yes.
know, these home derbies and
They're just such a well-coached team.
Yeah,
I think
they're
that's
gonna-
always the bit
I
to
think
see, and they
they're gonna-
defend well. They move forward well.
Another interesting result for me, Nick Gonzalez is coaching Trinity House, Rand Park Ridge, and they managed to beat Uplands 4-3. Trinity House were
nice
also at independent schools and gave a good account. It was a tough festival for them, but they gave a good account of themselves. And nice to see them playing opposition outside of Johannesburg as well. You know,
So we talk about a derby weekend, but some of these derbies were a little bit far afield.
Yes.
So, well, yeah, a wonderful weekend of hockey. There's so many more games to talk about. We'll be back after the break as we delve into some of the other provinces, and specifically there was just a huge amount of real derby activity in the Eastern Cape this past weekend, and we'll talk a bit about those more in depth after the break. Welcome back to Hockey on 216, proudly driven by Hyundai, as we continue our discussion through another wonderful weekend of derby hockey around the country, a little bit of travelling and into different parts. It was particularly busy weekend in the Eastern Cape. It felt like, in the derby scene, boys, girls travelling all over the Eastern Cape as they do. It is one of those provinces where they tend to travel amongst the towns quite a bit and do quite a bit of travelling amongst themselves. So. Don't know where you want to start, Bridget. Maybe we should just start with DSG versus Pearson.
Yeah, a lovely derby there. DSG taking the win with the two Holderness sisters scoring, Lucy and Abigail. So nice one for them. So a 2-1 result eventually for DSG. I think a great game. Pearson really came out. It was a home fixture for them. They did really well to defend against a formidable DSG side coming off a tour out of Holland. And Jerwin Chamitz has said how his team is just also enjoying playing hockey. They're just having fun out there, which is great to see.
It looks like it, and it was obviously very celebratory with those 6 girls playing their 50th game, which so it was clearly a wonderful day for them.
Yeah.
Those Holderness sisters, it's going to be interesting. I think maybe next week we must do an update on all of those sisters and where the goals are, because I know Catherine Schultz got a goal this last weekend for Epworth and her sister didn't, so that competition's getting interesting.
Yep.
We need an update from all those sisters at St. Anne's. The Holderness sisters must be quite interesting this year. I mean, I think Abigail over their careers got, I think she's well into the hundreds now. So
Lucy
a
catching
good
her.
result.
Catching her.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Hudson Park, Framesby.
Also a great one, Hudson Park, a nice hockey school. They've always kind of struggled a little bit because of the travel side. They're a big school, so they're holding on to their hockey really well. And just a nice, home fixture again for them that they really enjoyed playing. I thought it was a great win on their side. And all
Another
that
close one, though, 3-2. Not a lot in it, was there?
Yeah.
So an interesting one. And then Woodridge and York, 0-0.
Yeah, Woodridge, again, this is a nice one. Both schools, small schools, and they play each other quite a bit. York has a really good hockey program out of Jason Slater, does a really good job out of York. And Woodridge, likewise, a traditional boarding school. So a nice small derby, but also a good one. They play most of their hockey also in the Spa Hockey Challenge in the Eastern Cape. So, a nice fixture for those two sides.
0-0 draw, always a tough one to go home with.
boys-
It feels
Woodridge-
like you haven't done that. And
Woodridge
sorry.
boys managed to get one over York, which I
Okay.
think they'll
That's
be
a great
excited
result for them.
by that
Yeah.
result. York
Absolutely.
played well at independent schools, did really well. So I
And as
think
Bridget said, those York boys have had a very long sort of proud hockey history.
Yeah.
absolutely.
They really have.
Absolutely. Sterling Merrifield. Now, I'm going to be quite ignorant. I don't know where Merrifield are from.
Well, that's my neck of the woods, Calvin. They're from East
The
London,
EC.
from
Okay.
the Eastern Cape.
I knew they were Eastern Cape, just didn't know whereabouts.
Yeah.
Small
Small
school
school.
growing
Yeah.
in East London, and good to see them on the hockey scene.
And competitive. I mean, 2-1 down to Merrifield and in the girls there. So, Merrifield to Sterling, sorry. So, a good result for them if they're young and
They
small.
actually host one of the Greg Billing sections out of Merrifield. So, yeah, they've got
There
a
you
nice
go.
setup
You learn
there.
something every week on Hockey
There we
on
go.
216, don't you? So, Otanikwa over Punt. That's a big one in the sort of George Eastern Cape area. Punt, one of those schools with just one of the most glorious views, aren't they? They're probably right up there with a sea view that's sort of something out of Cape Town, out of Clifton,
You're
So,
looking over the
Cape
edge
Town.
there of the point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
So Punt is really a gorgeous school.
Yeah.
And 3-2 to Otanikwa, so another
Yeah.
close result. in that Eastern Cape.
And I
derby.
think we made mention of it, if it was not last week, the weekend before, how Outeniqua have also kind of stepped up their hockey program slowly. We saw that result for them in the boys section. So
Absolutely.
a school that
the
you're
boys,
going to
yes.
have to watch a little bit more. They had a good win over Pearson, if I'm not mistaken. It was a while ago. So that one there.
boys, yeah,
I think they're going to give you a hard time, though, Calvin, if you say they're in the Eastern Cape. They proudly Southern
Well,
Cape.
it's George, yeah. Listen,
Southwestern District.
As I say,
Yeah.
it's Western Cape with the Eastern Cape feel,
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
which is probably the best of both worlds of South Africa, isn't it? That sort of Western
beautiful,
Cape with
beautiful
the Eastern Cape
part.
feel. I guess that's as nice as we can be to anyone in that part of the world. It certainly is wonderful in that part. Not so close was Collegiate Union High.
Yeah, listen, Collegiate Union High, sorry. Yes, that was a 9-0.
9-0.
I was going to the next not
There's-
so
there's,
close one.
The ugly
Yeah,
results
yeah.
are all we've sort of left them
Yeah,
for the
yeah, yeah.
end.
I think a tough one. Union High, a very small school out of Graaff-Reinet, a beautiful school. I don't know if anyone's seen it.
Absolutely,
It's
wonderful
exquisite.
school. And
It's put up on the mountain
I
there.
grew up playing a lot of sport there,
Really?
having been at Muir and close to Uitenhage. So, but interesting that Jerwin Hamid was at Union High before moving
Okay.
to
DSG.
DSG. So I think their program's taken a bit of a dip after that.
Yeah.
But hopefully they'll get going.
And Collegiate have been playing good
Absolutely,
hockey, so
exactly.
they're a good side,
They came off the win of
9-0,
Augles
big win.
and-
They're
yeah.
really on a high,
Yeah.
that Collegiate program, so one to watch for the rest of the season. We'll be
Yeah.
watching them closely as they progress. As we say, we're on the sort of the, not quite cricket scores, but the big scores.
Yeah.
Another big one there, Unisi 12-2 over Clarendon. That's
Yeah.
a tough one for Clarendon to
Yes.
swallow.
Yeah, I think that's a real big one for Clarendon to swallow. And I think probably just a bad day. Just a bad day in the office for them. I don't think anything in it besides that, because they've actually had a great season so far. They've had some nice results. They did well at the Greg Billing tournament. So just, maybe Unisi came out firing, travelled well.
Yes.
Just one of those where everything stuck
I
together.
mean, there's a
aligned.
Unisi team that perhaps hasn't had the results that we've sort of expected from them this year. They haven't had bad results, but certainly not the sort of level of results they've been getting over the last 4 or 5 years. So maybe they're just, getting it all together and
Yeah.
putting it away.
I think Coach Nika will be,
Yes.
Coach Nika Kutson will be very proud of that result. But in the same light, I think she's going to be like, I don't know if it's one where, toughest competition made them, it's not a result that you want to go home with often. It's one of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that, we've seen some big scores there, but what we've seen in Manny watches a lot of hockey as well, is that, in the modern game, it's very easy to concede 3 or 4 goals in a short space of time, and then
Yes.
you're on the back foot.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that's how these scores have come. There've been a couple of scores like this in the boys as well. And I think, if a school gets 4 chances and scores the first 4, you get a penalty corner early on, 2,
Absolutely.
3 penalty corners in the first chucker, it's a different game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
A tough one. Moving into the boys' side in the Eastern Cape, perhaps sort of the biggest one of the weekend was probably Queensdale. I mean, I think from a derby perspective, that's pretty much as big as it gets in South African school sport, isn't it?
Yeah, look, a really good competition, it must be said. It was about 1-1 for the first half. The atmosphere at that ground was absolutely fantastic.
Incredible,
which
wasn't
was-
it? It always
which
is.
was,
Whether
absolutely
we do
brilliant.
athletics, whether the
way
rugby
those
later
boys
in the
sing
day
is
is
just
Exactly.
incredible.
Exactly. So
it was incredible.
fantastic atmosphere. At the end of the day, Queen's managing to take that one away 4-2. But it was a brave effort from the Dale side. A really, really good effort.
Dale are in the process of rebuilding their program there. I mean, a rich history in sport, Dale College. So
They've got a new head as well, if I'm not
new
mistaken.
head, Craig Hatches, I think is
Yes.
his name. He was at St Andrews before, went to Dale, and he'll know what it's like to compete at that level. So certainly look forward to seeing what Dale can produce in the future.
All those Queenians that I know will be very pleased with their side's efforts there. Hudson Framesby, in your part of the world?
Yeah, I mean, both schools with long hockey history now. Good game. Am I right that
Hudson with a 2-1 win?
Yeah.
Yes, Hudson with a 2-1 win.
Close result. So just lots of these close results,
I mean,
largely in the Eastern Cape.
Yeah, one that stood out for me, Calvin, was the boys' side of the Pearson DSG Derby, St Andrews College, who
Yeah.
who have had a really, really good season. You
Also
know,
coming off a tour, if I'm not
coming off the
mistaken.
tour.
Also coming,
They beat Pearson 3-1, and Pearson had a good Hibbert Shield. I mean, they're a
Absolutely.
good team.
Yes,
So a
they'll
3-1 win there for St Andrews College.
They'll
Very
be very
good
pleased
result.
Yeah.
with that, won't they? Down that. And Stirling Merrifield, you know, now that I know where Merrifield's from, Stirling we obviously know. Another 1-1 draw, very close game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Merrifield, I think, will be happy with those results. Sterling also, you know, have had a big school, you know, co-ed focus on their sport. So good result for
For a
Merrifield.
small Merrifield, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very good one to see. Grey High 3-1 over Wynberg, probably what we'd expect.
Yeah, you know, it's been an interesting season for Grey. They maybe haven't got the result they would have
Bit
wanted,
of a Maritzburg College type season.
yeah, exactly.
Up and down.
They've played good hockey, but maybe haven't got the results they would have wanted. But a good victory over Wynberg. It's a good Wynberg
Wynberg
side.
always tough to beat.
Yeah, exactly.
Always.
Good Wynberg side that
A lot of
likes to
boys
score
playing in
goals.
that sort of club hockey that they
Yeah.
host there, and
Yeah,
so it's always very,
Central.
very tough. Woodridge over York, we spoke about 3-2 for Woodridge. They'll be very pleased with that. So
Yeah.
incredible weekend of hockey in the Eastern Cape this past weekend.
Absolutely.
Some schools were on tour from Pretoria down to KZN, and I know one that you're going to want to crowbar. Maybe, you know, you and Guy and Rosa saw the result coming. We didn't see this result coming. We thought St Albans were in for a very tough weekend down at Clifton.
Yeah.
Especially after Clifton's, you know, results in Port Elizabeth the weekend before.
Clifton have been really good this season. You know, they did well at Coastal Cup and then went to Hibbert Shield and did exceptionally well there. They held some really good teams. They drew with Maritzburg College in the group stages. So we always knew we were going to be up against it, travelling down to Durban. But you know, probably one of the better performances I've seen from the St Albans team. You know, I spoke about the one 15-year-old. There was another 15-year-old, Michael Meyring, who scored St Albans' second goal. He
saw that run, just an incredible run, didn't it?
Broke from inside the St Albans 23 and went and won a penalty flick, one-on-one with a keeper, and then scored the penalty flick to bury the game.
To have the presence of mind to run that 75 metres, gets the penalty flick. There was a bit of a mix-up with the umpires. He scores it. The umpires make him take it again. He's cool and calm enough to do it again. When a youngster pulls that off, it's, you know, it's always impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's quite interesting. Some of these young players that we mentioned like the Orlando Radomeyers, we talk about Jason Joyner, the freedom they have at that level is just unbelievable. Absolutely.
That's a good point. And
confidence.
obviously that's great coaching, that coaches are allowed to say to these youngsters, guys, we've picked you. You know, if you're good enough, you're old enough, and that seems to be the attitude that they take into the field.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's happening quite a bit across the board. I mean, there was quite a traditional trend where you didn't pick anyone young, and now we're seeing a shift in mindset to very much like, if you're good enough to play, you're old enough to play. Yeah.
And great. And in KZN, some interesting, not too many girls' results that we saw this weekend. So I know Wickham Collegiate had a couple of games this weekend or last week.
Yeah, St John's took one against Wickham Collegiate, 1-0. So Jenna Shuker, who looks after the hockey program at St John's, will be chuffed with that one. A nice game for them. They dominated against Wickham Collegiate in that one. So probably could have got more in, but a good fight from Wickham. And then
earlier in the week, that Wickham Collegiate side went 4-0 down to really a resurgent Epworth team. As I said, Catherine Schultz and her team there. We've had them on the show with Darren Gallagher. They certainly got a lot of plans going forward into the future, and she's another goal ahead of her sister now. So we'll see how that one rolls out. Were there a couple of other games down in the KZN?
Yeah, St Mary's Kloof played Fatima, and not one that I'm going to speak about, so I'll leave that, unfortunately.
St Mary's seem a bit like Greenwich. They have these great tournaments. And
have you not seen? I wanted to move on.
Moving right along.
Right along. And the younger sides at St Mary's played St Anne's, and that also nice for St Mary's Kloof. They got a few wins there, but the first team didn't play that fixture, so one to still wait to be watched. And then there was an awesome Spa Hockey Challenge, so a Spa Hockey tournament. Where
it was the KZN North Coast version.
Yes.
For those who don't understand, it's obviously played all around the country in sort of different
regions,
tournaments that build into a national final.
Yeah, so this here you're seeing Felixton taking the win against Grantley, which is huge for them. Grantley have traditionally won that regional
They won it last year, Grantley.
Yes.
Yep.
And they all the winners of the various regions then come together in a culminating big final in July and play out of that.
So that's 26th, 27th of July
Yeah.
at St. Mary's
At St.
DSG
Mary's.
in Kloof.
Yes.
We'll be hosting that. Hopefully they
Yeah.
are better hosts than they were participants last week, Bridget, but I'm sure they will be. We know they put on some wonderful
Yeah.
events and will be doing so with Spa. As you said with Felixton, they actually lost to Grantley in the pool stages
Yeah.
of the tournament, came back, drew the final, 0-0, and went to
And
penalties
shootouts.
and won it in shootouts. So, yeah, just wonderful for those girls, as you say, to be going to those finals.
Isn't it a great opportunity that SPA is giving to these teams to play at this level, showcase their abilities, and who knows what Felixton will do going into the next round of the competition?
No, it's
Well, don't get Bridget started on the Spa tournament. She was right there from the start of that tournament and is very proud of what it's built into.
15 years
Aren't
ago. Yeah, Les Galloway started this tournament, I'll say with me, but alongside me, and we came up with the idea, and she ran with it, and it was brilliant. And
It
it's
started
so
in the
exciting.
KZN. It sort of moved
It's
into other
growing,
parts
yeah.
of the country.
Yeah.
I know the next leg is this Saturday, being hosted
Yes.
at Creston College. So we'll be following that very, very closely on Hockey on 216, proudly brought to you by Hyundai. And after the break, we'll be coming back for what is, without doubt, the biggest tournament in boys hockey in the southern Gauteng region, Aitken and Boden, next week. And welcome back to Hockey on 216, proudly driven by Hyundai. Bridget, I've been telling you for a bit that you need to look at these new shoes. The guys have been telling me from Take-A-Lot and various stuff that the Wave Panthora from Mizuno are the hockey boots to use. I actually bought them for my son. He's used them this past season. Says they're the best hockey boots he's ever played in. I took the liberty of ordering you some. So
Oh, and that's very
have a look.
kind. I've actually got a hockey game on Thursday against JP St Andrews, so you never know that these
And
beautiful
they've
numbers.
arrived. I ordered them on the weekend. They've arrived at studio this afternoon,
Let's.
as they said they would.
Well, we know who the favourite is here.
Well,
Don't get my sister.
it's always worried when she's running Comrades Marathon in a month and she's still playing hockey. So, yeah, these are them. They really tell me that once you play in these Wave Panthoras, you won't play in anything else. They are available at Take-A-Lot. There's a 20% discount until the 30th of June. I think it's Mizuno Run 20 is the discount code for those who are interested. We've obviously spoken about some really wonderful specials on the Take-A-Lot sports section, and specifically looking at hockey. So, Bridget, enjoy.
Yeah, these look very exciting, hey?
Exciting. So we'll look forward to
Thank
you
you. Thank you,
running
Take-A-Lot.
them out. And yeah, nice colour too.
I
We
know.
won't miss you. Massive week for boys hockey in Southerns. Perhaps in the Southerns region, our most, the week we probably look forward to the most when it comes to boys hockey in Southern Gauteng. It's Aitken and Boden. For those of you around the country, effectively this is played at an open level is Aitken, under 15 level is Boden. I know quite a bit about the history of Boden, just because Warren Boden is probably the father of hockey at Jeppe, which is probably, I think it wouldn't be amiss to say, the hockey school in Johannesburg. So he had a massive influence on the game in Southerns through the 70s, 80s, and the playing of the game. I don't know much about Aitken.
Aitken's also not dissimilar, started in the 70s. I think it started with a family that donated a cup out of St Stithians, and it was sort of the pinnacle of schoolboy hockey, and they didn't want their name on the cup, so they named it Aitken after
Because
Trevor
if you ever
Aitken.
see the trophy, it actually talks about it as just the Southern Gauteng or Southerns.
Yes, it doesn't actually
Southerns
say,
hockey, but
say
obviously
Aitken
referred
on
to
it.
as Aitken
Yes.
and Boden.
Yeah.
It starts Thursday,
Starts on Thursday.
and the finals on Sunday.
Finals on Sunday, and it's a new one because it actually has moved around a bit. Used to be hosted at Randburg and then St Stithians, and now this year it's going to be out of Wits and UJ. So neutral
territory.
Yeah, neutral territory, with a bit of a spillover at other schools. Linden's hosting. I know Cares, Parktown, St John's, JP. So
And that's
it's a
because
lot.
it's sort of, there's, as I understand it, in Aitken and Boden, there's 4 pools in
Yep.
each, and there's 3 sections.
Yep, correct.
In the under-19s, and in Boden there's 2 sections. So, Manny, I know we've left you to do a bit of homework this past week. You're going to take us through. Let's maybe start at Boden. I think the other thing to say about Boden is it's an under-15 tournament, so we don't see any under-15 teams. So we're going to make maybe some predictions here, but that are very tough to make because we haven't seen an under-15. I guess it's last year's under-14s, but tough to make.
Yes, some of the bigger schools still have an under 15 age group, and they play under 15 hockey. But I would imagine that the under 15 for the Boden will be the best possible under 15 team. So they may take some of the under 14s up. So it is very difficult to predict that.
And does start to give you a good indicator of what next year's under 16 teams are going to look like from those teams. So yeah, be great and wonderful for us to.
Look, I mean, early on there, you have to say that JP will put their hands up. I mean, they've got a really good under 14 team. They had a good under 14 team last year. So, I think they will be, they won the Alan Monk under 16 tournament. Not sure how many under 15s played in that. So I think they'll be a side to look out for.
So, Manny, tell us, who's in what pools?
Yeah,
what do we have to look forward to?
So 100%. So the winners of last year, of course, King Edwards, they'll be at Parktown in Pool A. They'll be with Helpmacar, Krugersdorp, as well as Trinity. So it will be an interesting group. I expect Cares to go King Edwards through comfortably there. At JP will be JP, St. Stithians, St. David's, and Rand Park. I think that's going to be a really tricky group.
That's a tough pool.
JP, St. Stithians, wow.
Yeah, and St.
David's. Go through.
And St. David's, got a good younger team.
Yeah, tricky in Group B. At St. Benedict's, it will be St. Benedict's, Noordjewel, Kempton Park, as well as Fourways. And then to wrap it up.
Pretty open.
Yeah, St. Benedict's have had a great season in the youngster space. So Owen and Vumbi's worked hard on that program. So I think that they're going to probably find they're going to top it, and don't underestimate Noordjewel ever.
100%.
Fourways have had good hockey for a long time as well. So
Fourways also do very well.
That's going to be an interesting one to watch. Maybe more interesting pools.
And to wrap it up, at Monument, Monas, Parktown, St. John's, and Northcliff High School. So interesting.
Pretty even.
Yeah, I think I would think
teams
so.
in that space as well.
I would think so.
So Boden, for those that are interested, obviously, Bridget, we'll be Aitken and Boden Thursday and Friday. We'll have a lot of that live on Channel 216, as well as all matches on the app.
All the matches from the various sections will be played out. There might be one or two that we miss only because they spill over to schools where they're only like one fixture on Thursday, but majority of it will be on SuperSport Schools app. Yeah.
So Thursday and Friday, we'll see a lot of it on Channel 216 for most of the day. The Boden final will be 3 o'clock on Sunday. It won't be live on Channel 216, but we will be replaying it later that evening on 216 after the Gauteng Development League football is over for the day. So for those of you around the country who are interested in the Boden final and looking what the young Southern players look like and who's going to be there, Cares JP?
Yeah.
St. Stithians, Parktown?
It'll be interesting to see how the draw works afterwards. Manny, maybe just for the viewers at home, it's top 2 from each pool go through to the knockout stages. And how long are the games? Are they full games? Are they?
So the first couple of games will be 20 minutes a half. So it will still be. They play 25 minutes a half on a normal basis. So 20 minutes a half, and then going into the play.
That's still 40 minutes of hockey in total, which I think is going to suit some teams. And if you don't get on the scoreboard early there, we see a lot of draws often in the pool stages.
Yeah, and exactly. I think that's where that defensive mindset's going to come into play heavily in a young side. I think if you're going to see a team that's well coached at the under 15 level are going to be the teams that go through. Yeah. And you've got mature hockey, you've got to play clever hockey, you've got to be defensively good. All of that's going to come into play heavily in the Boden section because you can't be as free there. You're still maturing. So.
We really are looking forward to a wonderful Boden tournament, but I think the one that really interests us this year is the Aitken tournament, largely because, I think maybe let's start with it up front and then we can go into how we think they're going to get there. I can't see any other two teams in St. Stithians and JP being in that final at 4:30 on Sunday afternoon. Might be wrong. If anyone's going to make it might be that Cares outfit. But certainly JP and St. Stithians, two of the best teams in the country. This is the one chance they get to come against each other in tournament hockey and play for a trophy.
Yeah, look, I mean, and there's an opportunity they're going to see each other twice because they are grouped together. Of course, St. Stithians didn't have the greatest Aitken last year. They finished 9th, which means that they find themselves in the same group as...
having won it the year before.
Having won it the year before. So they've ebbed and flowed.
And that's going to be an early game, 7:30 on Friday morning.
7:30
So, I mean,
Friday
that's-
morning, Channel 216.
Channel
It's going to
216,
be one
but
of the
that's-
hockey matches of the season to watch.
And
I think
Chile
Manny and I,
and-
we're in
yeah.
commentary, Manny. So
Yeah,
I'll be
100%.
seeing you early. Please bring coffee.
We'll do.
I'm sure there's a spa just around the corner there that makes some of the most wonderful hot coffee. So if you'll bring me a cup, I'll appreciate it.
100%, 100%. So going into that tournament, this one, of course, split over 4 venues if you want to get yourself down there. So at Wits, Pool A, the one we'll all be looking forward to, Jeppe, Trinity Rand Park, St. Stithians, as well as the newcomers Heronbridge, who will have a tricky time in that group.
That's a tough group. Yeah.
Yeah, tough group.
that's tough.
At UJ, probably another tough group. Parktown, who were in the final last year, a really good effort. St. Benedict's, Monument High School, as well as Baloo, will be in that group at UJ. Group
No, but we haven't said a lot about Baloo this year. How are they going?
They've had a tough season so
Yeah,
far.
they've struggled.
Yeah.
They really have struggled this season. I think a couple of years ago they played in that final, if I'm not
They
mistaken.
did.
3-4 years ago.
And they've struggled a bit this season, but it'll be interesting to see how they go in the tournament format.
yeah,
So a very open pool at UJ.
yeah, open pool. Yeah, Ebden Flow, they actually fought for relegation last year. So amazing how these sides do ebb and flow. At King Edward's, Group C will be St. John's, Helpmachar, Noordhoevel and Northcliffe. Personally, I think this is going to be one of the trickiest groups to get out of for these sides. St. John's not having maybe their best year.
Tough loss to St Andrews. They'll be disappointed with their St Andrews loss
Yeah.
last
Right,
weekend.
St Andrews School, that wasn't a good result for them. But
And
Woodhouse and team got some work to do. Got a couple of days to prep
Yeah.
that team.
And you can never count out a Helpmachar or a Noordhoevel or a Northcliffe side. And then
Helpmachar coming off having one of their kids win a gold medal at the relays last
I
night in
know.
Kukumur. So the school must be on an absolute high. And one thing we know is they've got athletes.
Yeah, they can run. They
They can run.
No,
So
exactly. And then wrapping it up in Group D at St. John's, King Edward, St. David's, Four Ways, as well as Rand Park. So should be a self-explanatory group, but at Aitken, you just never know.
I was about to say that's what's so fascinating about this tournament is that I remember coaching and you always kind of worked up to it. Even though you didn't, it's always in the back of your mind. And
I think she's going to tell us that she won this tournament. at St. David's. Is that where you're going, Bridget?
I wasn't going to
As
say
a
it.
coach at St. David's.
As a coach
Bridget
at St.
won
David's when we
8.
won this. No, but you know what it is? It's also one of those where you don't know what you're going to get. So you could go and all of a sudden play Cares, and Cares have a flying start, and they continue that all the way through to Sunday.
It's 4
So-
days, isn't it? 4 very...
Yeah, and it really can go
competitive
anyone's way often, I think.
I think the one thing, obviously being at Wits this time, which I guess is the sort of home astro of Helpmachar,
Yeah.
but it has been in the last couple of years, a lot of those finals hosted at St. Stithians. I know when they won it 2 years ago, it was very, very definitely,
Yeah.
St. Stithians, we've seen it at the St. Stithians Festival, they get behind their teams. There's a real
There's
roar.
a loud, yeah.
And, you've seen Aidan Blatch play with that roar. It definitely ticks his box because he gets moving when it's on that astro. So a little bit more of a neutral astro for Jeppe, for Saints, for Cares,
Yeah, I think
who we think will probably be there.
I think it will play quite nicely into the tournament. And that it's a nice astro. It's, it allows for big crowds. So, hockey lovers can all come down and watch it.
Absolutely.
And
Well, it'll be
it's
great
gonna
to really fill it out, won't it? I'm
Yeah.
going to put you all three on the spot before we close the show. So, Bridget, seeing as you've won it before and you should know the most about it, pick us a winner.
So I'm going to... I have to let go of emotions here and probably say that I think that's St. Stithians are going to take a little bit of a clinch over JP. I think they've
There's
got
a
it in
call.
there. Yeah.
Moodles?
I suppose, do I have to quantify my call? But I'm going with JP. I think if you look at JP, have not conceded many goals this year, and I think it's going to take a sterling effort to beat them twice. What's of interest to me is I'd like to know what the next round of fixtures look like.
Who gets a Cares or who gets a...
Yeah, because there's Pool A and B
They
crossover.
shift, yeah.
So Pool A and B, Pool A will meet Pool C.
Pool C, okay.
Yeah.
So remind me who's in Pool C?
So Pool C, St. John's, Helpmachar, Noordhoevel.
So you got...
There can't be a Cares Jeppe.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Until
So,
the sort
I mean, if we had to call,
semi-finals.
if we had to call the top four there, I would say Cares, JP, St. Stithians, and I think there's going to be a fight for that fourth place.
Yeah.
I'm putting my money on St. Benedict's getting into that fourth place.
Yeah, Owen, you wouldn't count against Owen, would you? Where are you going?
Right, so,
One for Jeppe, one for
right.
St. Stithians.
I wish I wasn't put in this situation, but
I know.
I'm going to go for semi-final Case Jeppe, which is going to be fantastic. We always love to see that battle going head-to-head. I'm actually going to go Parktown St. Stithians.
Of course, you're going Parktown. Good boy.
Of course,
Good
I'm waiting
boy.
for my old school jacket, so
Yeah.
I know Carl Reddy will be will have one ready for me. And then in the final, definitely St. Stithians Jeppe with St. Stithians taking it in the final.
It seems to be a St. Stithians. I'm a bit split on the hand, but I've got a feeling I think there's some magical players playing up front there in Aiden Blatch. I just like what he's doing this season. I think both teams have got pretty solid defence and have played really well, but I think he's going to be the difference up front there. So it's three of us versus you, Moodles, for St. Stithians. We'll soon know by next Monday when we.
Should we put a pair of hockey boots on it?
Hockey boots. As always, it's been wonderful talking to all three of you about schools hockey and obviously a little bit about the national team, the men's team, which we'll all be supporting towards the end of the month. We'll be back in a week to see who was right, who was wrong, and to give you a few more results from some wonderful derby hockey that's coming up in the week here on Hockey on 216, proudly driven by Hyundai.